Every company has difference makers, the people who go above and beyond what's required. This podcast is dedicated to the people who challenge the status quo and make good companies great. Today, we're sharing one story from one company in our effort to inspire others. Welcome to Difference Makers. Today, my guest is Ross Cowen. Ross is a mortgage industry leader in business development, recruiting, motivating teams. His successes are many and include building platforms such as W.J. Bradley, Caliber Home Loans, Cardinal Financial, Loan Depot, and now he is on a mission to build mission loans. You like how I tied that in?
I think that's awesome. We use that tagline all the time in different ways every day. Yeah,
Love
it's
it.
part of the fun of being at mission for sure.
Ross also has a great family life, 25 years, married, husband, father of 3 children, 22, 20, and 16. I've admired Ross's work from afar for many years. I had an opportunity to work with him just for a short period at one of the stops along the way. And Ross, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Jim, really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, man. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's get right into it. Ross, how did you end up in the mortgage business? Because nobody gets into the mortgage business on purpose.
That's right. Yeah, it was a good story for me. Is I was working at GE Capital, working in their leverage division. Basically, I'd provide senior debt facilities to LBO funds, and ran across a guy through an introduction of my stepbrother named Bill Bradley. And Bill had this great enthusiasm for going into the retail residential mortgage sector and creating a consolidated entity that would then handle a lot of the back office infrastructure items that, people tend to not want to think about or don't really want to pay a lot of attention to. And so at the time I was really burnt out on GE's culture, just kind of the culture that was GE at that moment in time. And so Bill made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And the next thing I know, I'm in the nascent PE world as it relates to, trying to develop a back office mortgage platform.
And you were there quite some time, over a dozen years, I think, right?
15 and a half years to be exact. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you say that was where you learned the most, or was that one of the more fulfilling places that you've been?
Bradley was a very interesting company to work for because all of us were relatively young when we got started, right? So when the first investment dollars went into the entity in '02, we got started in earnest and kind of doing due diligence and working through the market, trying to find targeted acquisition opportunities in '03. We're finally able to capitalize on all of that really, really hard work in '04, and subsequently went out to do our very best at building the platform via acquisition. We ended up doing 9 asset deals and 3 stock-based deals that kind of created the entity itself before the financial crisis. And so, yeah, it was very rewarding as it relates to, the intersection between private capital and the opportunity, right? In terms of talking to investors about what it is that we're doing, talking to mortgage company owners about what it is that the plan was. I think back on that time, and certainly it gave me the foundation that exists today, but I would definitely say that I learned the most about the mortgage business by working for Loan Depot.
It's always fun to look back, and it's funny, we don't recognize sometimes the good times when they're happening, and when we're learning and growing the most when it's actually happening. But then when we look back, we say, man, if I could do it all over again, I would have done this, or I would have done that, or I'm glad that this happened because that happened and I experienced that. I'm better here, and I don't get riled up. That's one thing I've noticed about you. You must be a tremendous husband and dad, because you just don't get riled up. You're just level set all the time, and I admire that about you. I think I've actually learned from you in that regards. So thank you for that.
Certainly appreciate the kind words. I try really hard.
How'd you meet your wife?
My family moved from Boulder, Colorado to Scottsdale, Arizona when I was going to be a sophomore in high school for my dad's new job. And when I was enrolling for classes, my wife walked through the cafeteria. And when I saw the opportunity of what obviously what she looked like when she was 15 years old, I just had to meet her, and that just kind of started that whole cycle.
No kidding. So high school sweethearts.
Since we were 15, that's right.
Wow, that's awesome. And you and I have talked about that before. Your wife is your best friend, and that's really admirable, especially in today's environment. I feel the same way. Children, all boys?
Older girl, 2 younger boys.
And your boys are in sports?
Yes, they are. So my middle son has moved on to like theater and music education at Arizona State University. And then my younger son is still in high school back here in Colorado at Monarch High School, and is a baseball player.
I like the game within the game of baseball. That's the one thing that's always captured my attention. I'm a football guy, but I played baseball too, and a lot of people watch a game and they see a ball being pitched, a ball being hit, but they don't really see the game that's going on within the game, the actual strategy that's happening.
Couldn't agree more. Baseball to me is so interesting and fascinating at every single pitch, every single at bat,
Mm-hmm.
every single defensive position. Um,
Has a
I
purpose.
Yeah, everything does, and for me, that is definitely where I choose to spend my very limited spare time, is definitely in the game of baseball and watching and learning and trying to just trying to grow my skill set as it relates to, I wonder why that player did that, or I wonder why that pitcher pitched around this particular player, or why they pitch him backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Different things like that are always very interesting to me.
Do you see any correlation or similarities between sports and business?
All day, every day,
What
every
are some?
moment of every day.
Okay, tell
Yeah.
me about some of those.
What sports teaches you, especially baseball, just to piggyback off of that concept, is baseball teaches you about failure, right? I mean, it's the only sport in my view where you can bat 300 and still get into the Hall of Fame,
What do they say? Fail 7 out of 10 times and make the
right?
Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And so the opportunity to, especially in our industry where there's a lot of people to talk to, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
there's loan officers to speak with, there's executives at other companies to speak with, there's certainly branch managers and vendors and providers and whatnot. But it's the opportunity to continually refine your craft, right? It's the opportunity to continually try and get better every single day or every single conversation about what it is that you're trying to communicate. I think one of the things that I've learned more recently in my career than early on in my career is you just can't please everybody. And so trying to really dig down and the kind of initial conversations as it relates to what it is that you're trying to communicate, I think is really so important. And I think sports teaches you that, right? It teaches
Mm-hmm.
you that you have to learn to see signs. You have to learn how your
Mm-hmm.
body is feeling at any given moment in time, and you have to learn to adapt.
And that really does correlate not just to business, but really all aspects of life.
100%.
What is it that motivates you, Ross, professionally and personally? What is it that motivates you? Start with professionally.
I think professionally for me, I didn't grow up to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And so I don't have a reoccurring stream of income from my past clients, right? We're only as good as the last deal that we did, and we're only as good as the last relationship that we created. And so for me, I wake up every day thinking very strongly about how can I add value to my relationship base today. And so it's very important to me to act with integrity and honesty with every single person that I come in contact with, because chances are really good that in the 7 levels of Kevin Bacon, they're going to know somebody that you've had interactions with, and that reputation is going to basically come back around. So it's professionally, what drives me is to treat everybody the way that I'd like to be treated, right? Which is with honesty and integrity.
That's reflective of this model that you're rolling out right now.
Mm-hmm.
With the radical transparency that you're providing, no hidden agendas, and here it is, and let's partner up and let's work together if we believe that we're a good fit for one another and find success together. So that's one of the things that really drew me to, because I asked myself, I said, why did he leave Loan Depot to come do this? And as you and I talked and got to know a little bit more about why, it really resonated with me too. Because I think after so many years of this business, I've been in it 30, I'm 56 years old. I sort of have a no bullshit, tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of at that point where it's, let's get rid of the fluff and let's really talk about what matters. Don't trick me into working here, in other words. And we see so much of that in our business. Hidden ball tricks and shell games. It's maddening. It's maddening. And you talk to some candidates and potential candidates or branch managers or leaders, and they've got an obvious bias based on some of the experiences that they've had. They already know, like, they and you have to kind of walk them back from that and say it's not like
Mm-hmm.
that everywhere.
Yeah. And in fact, this morning we just had a board meeting, and one of the questions that was asked by our chairman, which was, how are we going to keep these originators here, right? How are we going to stop the every 3-year carousel that seems to go on in the branch manager industry. And he said, are you going to potentially follow some strategy like some of your competitors by locking them up with, large dollars and locking them up with like ridiculous contracts that, that they can't break? And I said, no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm not going to pay big signing bonuses, and I'm not going to lock them up into obscene contracts that make them feel like an indentured servant. What I am going to do is I'm going to treat them with honesty and integrity. I'm going to show them all the data as it relates to what's happening inside of their portion of the loan business. And I'm going to bet on the come that people want to be treated that way. Now,
What a crazy idea, Ross. How dare you?
Crazy idea. Now, are people eventually going to leave? Yes, that's the nature of our industry, right? And
Sure.
like the earlier comment, I can't be all things to all people.
Right.
But for the people that understand what it is that we're doing, I do believe that there's a very, very good chance of long-term relationship, happening at that level, right?
What motivates you personally?
Oh, the love of my wife, the love of my children. Absolutely. I want them to understand that dad got up every day and went and did his very best, and he did it for the benefit of the family. And that's what motivates me 100%.
To me, there's no greater honor than one of your adult kids reaching back out to you because they may be struggling with something, whether it's a business proposition or whether it's an ethical dilemma or something like that, and they can reach back to dad or mom and seek counsel. To me, that's the ultimate.
100%. Yeah. I just had a daughter graduate from college, and she's out on her own and working in the real estate industry. And so the opportunity to counsel and coach her and talk to her every day, multiple times a day, to what's going on with her, and how potentially my experience in the mortgage industry, right, or my experience as a professional can, help her is it's insanely valuable to our relationship, right? Now, whether I add value to her or not will remain to be seen. But as as it relates to the relationship with my children, absolutely, it's paramount.
What are some of the things you've tried to ingrain in your kids growing up as you've kind of evolved from, toddler to adolescent to young adult?
I think the first thing I would say is that, it's okay to fail. What's not okay is not to try, right? So you got to try, you got to fail. You got to fail over and over again. I think it kind of goes back to that baseball analogy. I think the other thing that I've really wanted to instill in my children is the opportunity to go compete. We're very, very fortunate to live in the environment that we live in, but there are a lot of people that want your seat, right? I mean, there are people that want my job. There should be, by the way. I mean, there should be 20 or 30 people that want my job today. If I don't go out there and compete, if I don't go out there and treat everybody with integrity and honesty, then I should be replaced, right? And so they got to get up every day and they got to go make it happen.
I noticed one of the quotes. I did some snooping on you on Twitter, and you're a quote man. And
Yes, I am.
one of the quotes was, "If you worked as hard at doing difficult things as you did avoiding them, you'd be unstoppable."
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. And then another one that you put up there. You said, "You want a shortcut? Here's one. Stop believing that anyone who's successful at anything has some secret other than focus, drive, and a shitload of hard work. There's your shortcut."
That's right.
That's exactly some of the things I've tried to share with my kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my son would be struggling with something. I say, "Look, I don't know anything to tell you other than to work harder. I mean, that's all I know. It's just take more reps, take more swings, take more ground balls, whatever it is. All I know how to do is to work harder."
Yeah, I totally agree. I also believe in the tone. I call it the Tony Gwynn aspect of life, right? Like Tony Gwynn made it not only to the major leagues, but made it to the Hall of Fame by hitting a bunch of singles. Go hit a bunch of singles. You'll be completely, absolutely amazed at what happens as if you go hit a bunch of singles instead of trying to hit the home run or the triple, right? Like, I cannot even believe how awesome Bryce Harper is right now in the postseason for MLB, right? Like the opportunity to close out San Diego by hitting a 2-run bomb, Oppo, right? Oppo, in that pressure-packed environment with a guy throwing a sinker 98 miles an hour, right? And then even as recent as last night, at the top of the first, recognizing that McCullers is tipping his pitches and he gets a hanging curveball that he tattoos over the right field fence. I mean, that guy's amazing, but all of us can't be Bryce Harper. A lot of us can be Tony Gwynn. So go hit a bunch of singles, keep your eye on the prize, and I think you'd be really surprised at what happens to the trajectory of your career.
Another quote you had was, "Not many people have consistent discipline when times are good, even fewer in times of stress." Why do you think that is? Why do you think people sort of, I don't know, give up?
Um, I would use the phrase, I think when people don't know what to do, they freeze, right? They kind of go into neutral. It's like, look, I don't know what direction to go, so I'm just not going to go nowhere, right? Or, you know, I feel my body changing as I get older, but I don't want to do anything about it, right? So they just do nothing, right? And I think, I'm very guilty of that, right? Like that's why I published some of those quotes, is because I reread them in order to remind myself that, like, hey, you can't get stuck in neutral, man. You got to keep going, right? It's an unfortunate byproduct of, our society at the moment, is we just kind of get stuck and we do nothing. Well, let's get unstuck and let's move in a direction that we feel like we should be moving in.
Difference Makers is powered by Verity Search. In today's competitive war for talent, they understand recruiting requires having a strong sales and marketing approach. Recruiting is not posting jobs online and waiting for unqualified people to apply. It's active, it's engaging, and it's working with people while maintaining extreme confidentiality. Their solutions and techniques are innovative and brave, but based on industry knowledge and key identification strategies. Some of the key services include strategy planning, research, marketing, prospect identification, qualification, and recruitment across all markets and geographies. If you'd like more information, please check out the website at veritysearch.com. Ross, who are some of your early inspirations? You mentioned Bradley, but who are some of the other early inspirations in your life, whether professional or personal?
Definitely my dad, right? The opportunity for him to, get his master's, get his doctorate degree, have a vision as it relates to what he wanted his professional career to be like. Mm-hmm. The ability for him not to be afraid to move the family, right, in order to achieve his kind of, his desires as it relates to what he wanted to do with his professional career. I watched that discipline that he brought to the family every day. And, as I get older, I'm just continually amazed by that. I was really blessed in that, and still am blessed today, that I have a lot of really good friends from early on in my life, whether that be through kind of elementary and junior high, all the way up through the high school ranks. And so, I try very hard to continually find the glasses half full in every sort of situation. I'm an eternal optimist.
I'm just wondering where that started from, or where that came from. Obviously, your parents had a part in that. So dad's work ethic and seeing him get up and go out.
Yeah. And then answering your question, or listening to your question, hopefully a different way, I would definitely say my mom, right? So my mom was born on a Julesburg, Colorado, which is literally in the middle of nowhere, on a very, very flat, very dusty farm, right? And the opportunity for her to find her way to the University of Colorado and meet my dad, and subsequently start her life going forward. I mean, she's always very, or has been extremely stern, but also very pragmatic, I guess I would say, as it relates to the opportunities that are in front of us.
Who would you say would be maybe some of your boyhood idols? Who did you kind of look at and just, who was your favorite couple of players or something growing up?
Ryan Sandberg, Tony Gwynn, Michael Jordan, John Elway.
Why Sandberg? Were you a Cubs fan?
Well, if you remember, right, like the only thing that was on during the summer was the
WGN,
WGN, right? And Colorado, where I grew up, being the kind of the last stop on the Midwestern values train, right? Got it every day, right? So at like 2:00, if you wanted to watch a game, which of course I do, you'd listen to Harry Carey, and I always thought Ryan did such a good job of being so consistent. I mean, I could very easily have inserted like Cal Ripken into that. The other part is, for the most part, although Elway later on in his life, they never created any headlines, right? They weren't out, getting in trouble or anything of that nature. So I always thought that was, part of who I wanted to be.
I really thought Elway was going to be a real troublemaker, because he was one of the first to come out and say, "I'm not going to that team if they draft me." Didn't the Colts draft him? Or
they did?
Yeah. And then I think then Eli did the same thing with the Chargers later on.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly
because of what Elway was able to pull off. Yeah.
Well, and I also think that's a function of Elway's dad, right? Like Elway's dad had such a massive influence on his son. There's probably, just like the Manning family does on their sons, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of synergy.
Just like you do on your sons, just like I did on my sons, just in a different way.
Right.
You talk about a lot of people talk about Dan Marino, and I don't know if this is true or not, but do you remember how Marino used to short arm it, used to throw from
Mm-hmm.
right here?
Mm-hmm.
They used to say, and he had the quickest release. And somebody told me a long time ago that his dad used to put his back against the garage door
Mm-hmm.
and make him throw from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I
I've
don't know if
never heard
that
that story, but it doesn't surprise me. I
I've
mean,
never.
how
Yeah,
else are you? Yeah, how else are you going to get into that throwing
yeah.
position?
How else do you throw from that spot?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, here we are. We've just come out of the last 2 years of one of the most explosive times in the mortgage business for volume, record setting, companies just making money hand over fist, 2020 and 2021, rates at an all-time low. And here we find ourselves now nearing the end of 2022, and it's been a rising interest rate year. A lot of volume dropped. People complaining about 7% interest rates and about to go up again, from what I understand,
Mm-hmm.
and many predicting we're going to see 10. Where do you see us right now in terms of an industry? How do you see? What do you forecast for the next, I don't know, 6, 12, 18 months in this business? What is it going to take for companies to prosper in this next phase of the business?
That is the $1 million question that's facing our entire industry of independent mortgage banks, right? And so I think that there used to be a thought process around that bigger is always better, right? But I'm not sure in this environment that bigger is better, just due to the amount of layering that has to exist inside of a large organization in order to pay for the, whether it be, the tech stack, or whether it be the management stack, or cost of capital. I think that it's really, really, really interesting when you look at the beginning of the year. We had Caliber, we had FAM, we had Loan Depot, we had G-Rate, right? You have all these kind of bigger players, if you will, monster players that are jockeying for kind of that top 5 sort of designation, or top designation. And now they've just been absolutely decimated, right? FAM is closed down, Caliber is shrinking, Loan Depot is shrinking, G-Rate continues to be G-Rate. Now Movement has kind of moved into that one of those top spots. Cross Country has moved into one of those top spots. So it'll be interesting to see how kind of the changing of the guard at the top of the rankings kind of, I think, does financially over the next 12 months. I think that smaller players and simpler players are better in this environment. There's less volatility because there's just less moving pieces and parts. So I think you'll see some of the smaller players, do reasonably well, if not, do awesome in this environment. I would be very, very concerned if I was at a mid-level player. I just don't think that they have enough heft from a volume standpoint, nor enough bench strength, if you will, from a management standpoint to get where they need to be. So for me, I think that 2023 is obviously going to be a difficult year for volume. The forecasts are coming in around like 1.4 trillion, which is over half of what we had over the last couple of years. And I think it'll be interesting kind of to see what happens from a interest rate standpoint. The pundits that I tend to pay attention to are calling for, potentially some rate rallies towards the end of Q1 and towards the end of Q2 as we kind of roll through. Whether that happens or not, I think is, entirely out of our control, but seems to be about right considering the cycle that we're at. One of my early mentors in life said, when the screaming gets the loudest, that's kind of when you've reached either the top or the bottom. I don't think we've reached the top or the bottom of this particular cycle just yet, but you look at some of our competitors and their reactions this week, right? Companies closing 50, 60 branches in one fell swoop in order to try and fight to survive. How many other companies are going to have the discipline to do that? I don't know. I also feel like the independent mortgage bankers, specifically the owners of those businesses, how much of their balance sheet are they willing to give back, right? Before they say, hey, I have generational wealth. And what I mean by generational wealth is they have enough wealth on the balance sheet to take care of their generations for generations to come. Mm-hmm. But how much of it do they want to kind of give back from a financial perspective? So
the broker movement seems to be, rising in terms of popularity, but that's really, to me, just a price play. You don't really have the control You don't really have all of the weapons at your disposal. You can make so much more money as a mortgage banker than you can as a broker,
Hmm.
and really not be that far off. So I think what you're doing right now, in terms of that radical transparency that's happening, and then we're seeing it with a two or three different platforms that I know of,
Hmm.
where we're looking at people coming on more as partners as opposed to that
Hmm.
old employer employee relationship. These larger, bloated, hide the ball, shell game type things with margins. These lenders, they're in
Hmm.
harm's way, I think, in this next phase. And there's there's a million what I call Me Too companies out there. So that's what I call them, Me Too companies, because at the end of the day, it's the same pitch. It's just different colors on a business card. But when you have a real value prop, a real differentiation in how you go about the business with bringing people on and bringing them in as partners, um, I think, to your point, the smaller, simpler, um, more radically transparent. Those are I don't see people leaving those platforms. Where are you going to go? I mean, it doesn't get better anywhere else. Everyone has service. Everybody can close loans earlier on time now. What is the differential? What's that in this market?
Access to information. And I actually think that's what the broker channel really brought to us, right? The broker channel brought us access to information, access to rates, access to margins, and a way to counterbalance, whatever firm that you choose to work for. Um, I tell people, if, look, you're doing 90 to 95% conventional volume and it's just you and maybe one other originator, like go the broker route. Like it's ease of service. You can take care of your book of business. You're not going to grow, right? But if your intention is not to grow, then go for it, right? But if you want to be in a hyper competitive environment where we can compete with the local depository institutions, we can compete with the brokers, you certainly can compete with the IMBs today, and you want access to capital in order to go grow, this is a really, really good opportunity for you to find yourself in a different economic construct and a different relationship to go achieve those goals.
If you had to give somebody advice today that is just getting into the business, God forbid, right now,
Mm-hmm.
but if somebody was just getting into the business right now, what would you tell them? Maybe one of your kids, I'm getting into the mortgage business. Don't talk me out of it. I want to get into the mortgage business. What would you tell them?
That now would be the perfect time to go learn the ropes, right? Now would be the time to go do the open houses, call on as many realtors as you can, find a mentor of somebody in the mortgage industry that's maybe on the other side of their career that can hand you half of their book, for a reduced commission, of course, as it relates to learning how it is to be relevant in this market. And get out there and don't be afraid to fail, right? Like go to the realtor events, knock on the doors, make the calls that you feel like you need to make. Figure out, I guess the other thing I would say is figure out social media.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out a way that social media can work for you, whatever your style is, right? Figure out a way that social media can work for you. There's a couple of really, really cool originators that I follow that I think have whatever strategy it is. I don't know the name of it, obviously, but I think they're doing some really, really interesting things. But find a way to add relevance to, your referral partners, right? And then get in an economic construct that makes sense to you. Get in a shop that, you know, can explain what their value prop is or can explain what their pricing methodology is, and don't be afraid to fail.
As interest rates climb, the need for alternative product really becomes more and more. What are you seeing in terms of alternative product right now, and how necessary is it, do you think?
I think it's incredibly necessary as it relates to the creation of conversation with, potential new, either existing referral or new referral partners. It's like the bond program strategy that, frankly, a lot of people have, which I tend to agree with, which is, yes, we need to have the bond programs. Yes, we need to have every DPA assistance program that we can have. Do I expect to use it very often? No. Do I expect you to, use that in conversations as it relates to making sure that the door is always open to you so that your particular referral partner will never call another mortgage person? Absolutely. So, and especially in today's environment, it's all about product creation. I think the downside to that for companies like ours is clearly, how much time and energy are you going to spend versus some sort of future expected return? We are on a mission to roll out a new product every 10 calendar days is what we're doing right now. But there is that little, the conversation that we have to have as it relates to, well, when does the when does the product generation cycle stop, and when do you actually focus on value? And that'll come into play probably in the next rate cycle. But I think you need to have that stuff today. We have it in-house, which is great. Some of the products that I think are really relevant that are out there right now are like a 5-1 ARM program, right, at a depository institution, or massively huge in terms of competitive landscape and winning a home in a relatively upscale neighborhood. I think are just hugely important. And then I think one-time close, the ability to do one-time close well, which is a really hard product to do well, right, just given all the moving pieces and parts that exist with it. But those are two products that I'm actively chasing down that we do not have today, that I am actively chasing down.
But in this market right now, like you said, you just got to get out there. You got to be active. You got to stay out there. You got to attack social media. It's you're not waking up and your pipeline's larger than it was when you went to bed. Not anymore, anyway. So, like you said, get out there and hit some singles, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the more interesting things that happened at Mission for us is the ability for our CRM to send you as an originator a reminder of, these are all the people you talked to yesterday. These are all the people you talked to this week. These are all the people you talked to last month. Which one of these, needs, because not all of them are going to be on your hot list, right? So as you're kind of reviewing, I should reach out to the Wilsons because of X, Y, Z or the other, just little simple things that we're kind of turning people onto as it relates to, activity generation.
Yeah, so the automation helps you remember and
that's right,
stay present.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think every originator that I've ever known gets really, as they should, really focused on their active pipeline, right? But what's coming into the top of the funnel in this type of environment, I think, is also really important. And so staying, to borrow a phrase from a vendor, right, staying top of mind as it relates to, how to continually fill your funnel, I think is something that we spend a lot of time on as well.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes. I know you're ultra busy. You're in the middle of this big build of this great platform at Mission, and thank you for taking a few minutes out, letting people know who you are, kind of what you're about, and what the task is at hand. And we really appreciate your insight, both not just professionally but personally as well.
It was a fantastic use of time. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks, Ross. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.